In this video, we'll start to unravel the mystery of why poor and minority residents disproportionately bear the brunt of the effects of natural disasters. America is a capitalist country, and so it should come as no surprise that its responses to natural disasters are often influenced by the interests of commerce and big business. Although the terrorist attacks of September 11 were certainly not a natural disaster, President George W. Bush typified this attitude when he suggested that the best way for Americans to respond would be to go shopping.
Now, the American people have got to go about their business. We cannot let the terrorists achieve the objective of frightening our nation to the point where we don't conduct business, where people don't shop.
This response is nothing new. In 1906, the city of San Francisco was decimated in one of the most deadly disasters in American history. If you're like most people, you probably think of this as the Great San Francisco Earthquake. But at the time, business and political leaders repeatedly downplayed the fact that an earthquake had even occurred. In their public messaging, they put the blame for the death and destruction on the fires that occurred afterward. While it is true that the fires killed more people than the earthquake, civic leaders tried to brainwash the public into forgetting why the fires started in the first place. For example, the members of the San Francisco Real Estate Board all agreed that the calamity should be spoken of as the Great Fire and not as the Great Earthquake. Governor George Pardee was on board, saying, "The earthquake, severe and destructive as it was, did not do, as it has been so wildly heralded, much damage, in comparison with the following fire." And reporting on the city's response to the disaster, the Chicago Record-Herald said, "The men who are devoting their time to restoration of confidence and the rehabilitation of the city are very certain to minimize the disastrous effects of the earthquake." The expression is heard constantly, "There would have been but little damage had not the fire started." Business and civic leaders downplayed the importance of the earthquake in order to draw commerce back to the city. Earthquakes are far more likely to occur in some places than others. If owners and investors are frightened that their businesses will be destroyed by an earthquake, they won't set up shop in San Francisco. They'll go elsewhere. Fires, on the other hand, can occur anywhere. London, Chicago, and other major cities have been destroyed by fire at various points in their history. If the fire was the cause of the destruction in 1906, commercial interests shouldn't fear investing in San Francisco because it was no more likely to suffer a fire than anywhere else. The San Francisco earthquake was an early example of businesses trying to minimize or reframe the effects of a natural disaster, but it would not be the last. Just 20 years later, in 1926, a magazine called The Literary Digest was reporting that it has become a habit in resort regions to minimize or even suppress news of disasters that might frighten away tourists and investors. Why should this matter? Isn't it a good idea to want businesses to restart? Yes, but failure to confront the true causes and consequences of natural disasters has several effects. First, it results in people rebuilding in places that are prone to destruction, and the people who live there are often poor. For example, a 1926 hurricane near Miami killed at least 1,000 people and left more than 40,000 people homeless. The destruction was concentrated in an area near a lake that had previously flooded many times. As in Hannibal, Missouri, proposals to address the flooding problem were killed by business leaders who said, "Let the lake be damned, just no more taxes," because it was mainly poor people who lived there. But even worse, business and civic leaders tried to minimize the appearance of damage to the outside world, so as not to scare away investment. To this end, they discouraged people from donating to relief efforts for the poor. The American Red Cross raised only $3 million of $5 million in relief funds, the first time in its history that it had failed to reach its fundraising goal. The rush to attract business was a success but had a direct negative impact on the disaster's poorest victims. A Florida newspaper, the Homestead Enterprise, reported, "Florida in this day can handle all the tourists that she did before, and then some, while another class of people are living from hand to mouth, dazed and bewildered at the change that has taken place." A similar story occurred in Charleston, South Carolina, which suffered a major earthquake in 1886, which killed at least 60 people and destroyed most of the African American section of town. As usual, the business community downplayed the destruction, with the local newspaper saying that there must always be some suffering in a city of about 60,000 inhabitants. The city resisted providing any assistance to the victims, and when it finally did so, the aid was restricted only to the elderly and disabled. It was argued that none but the actually needy and those incapable of self-support need apply for aid, as there is abundance of work, at extra pay, to be gotten in Charleston. And even the assistance for the elderly and disabled was ended after 1 month. But the need for such aid was clearly not over. 1 month later, a local pastor reported that the condition of the people beggars description: no fire, save a little outdoors, poorly clad and living in damp districts. The death rate is nearly double.